better, side carry or appendix carry?
Oh, good question. All right, appendix carry versus side carry. I do back pocket carry and appendix carry. That way, the better is tough on this one, right? Because there's going to be body type issues. There's going to be clothing style issues. There's a lot of issues. Here's why. I'll tell you why I choose appendix carry. I used to only carry appendix in very specific situations, low-profile situations in crowds, particularly. Used to do a lot of executive protection work, and inside of crowds, carrying a smaller gun when it was a low-profile environment, knowing I'd be in the crowd, not wanting that protrusion if I'm bending over, maybe I'm working with a family and I'll have to pick up a kid, maybe we're in a dinner party setting, something like that, I'm going to be bumping up against people in the buffet line or whatever. I wanted the gun here because it's much less likely that anybody's going to bump into a gun or see a gun that's here, especially in a J-frame or like a Glock 26 or something like that tucked in here. So it was kind of a specialty carry position for me for a long time. Now, the irony is, how many of you have seen that Filipino assassin guy? Have you ever seen that video where the gun's tucked all the way down underneath of his shirt, and he reaches down and pushes up on the barrel and pushes the gun into his hand and fires 2 shots in like 0.8, like crazy fast? That video has been around forever. Like that video was around like before normal internet, right? Where the gun was tucked way down, he's walking through the crowd, he pushes the muzzle of the gun up into his hand, drives out and shoots. The FBI for a long time was having police officers identify the location where they were finding illegal guns on people or any weapon on people and drugs for a while. And you just have a silhouette of a human being front and back, and you're supposed to put an X where the weapon was. Lots of weapons carried here. People that weren't trained, people that weren't conditioned, people that weren't buying the holster off the rack from the magazine that was supposed to go here, a lot of people were carrying guns here. Undercover detectives were carrying guns here. Again, low profile and executive protection were carrying guns here. For years, we saw this. Jim Cirillo, Stakeout Squad days, back in the late 60s, early 70s. There's pictures of him in some of those situations and scenarios where he was carrying a gun here under like a members only jacket kind of thing, right? The access that you have here is huge compared to the access you have anywhere back here. Your control of the gun and access to the gun in close quarters. Captain George, come on. So I told him he's like Captain America but Miami Vice style. So if he's here and he's trying to choke me to death and I'm trying to not get choked and I need to go back here to get a gun, right? It's going to be a lot harder for me to get this gun and get up here back into the fight without him knowing versus me being here and trying to get control here to where I can access the gun here. Right? Plus, I have an ambidextrous ability to get down here now. It's much easier for me to reach this gun in this hand, any center line carry. So I started carrying a knife first center line, and then slowly over a period of 2 or 3 years kind of migrated my gun in the center line too, because it just made sense. And now it's something I look back and I say a decade ago, 12 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years, why wasn't I doing this all the time? Actually, when I was a full-time cop in the late 90s, I had a buddy of mine that kept his duty belt clear here, and he had kind of a little semi-drop, get under the heavy coat in Virginia in the winter holster. He used to slide his gun around to here, and he would do it as a habit. He did it for retention. So we were in some of the denser areas of the city, lots of craziness, out in the streets. If anything that would happen, you'd get a crowd to come out and see what's going on, and he just felt more comfortable with his gun pushed around over his thigh. Then when he'd get in the car, we'd sit down, he'd push his gun back. And he was essentially like in a modified on-duty appendix carry, but it was all about access and all about control. So that's why I choose this position, but I realize it's not going to work for everybody for a whole bunch of reasons. This gun that I'm carrying here, the grip's too long. Like, I'm not going to be able to conceal this gun well, clearly in this shirt. I was using this pistol for a demo up on the top range, but the gun I normally carry is the XDS 4-inch, so it's got the long slide. I find that a 4 or 5-inch barrel slide is actually more comfortable in the appendix carry position than the short like 3.3 or like the Glock 26, Glock 43 style, because they tend to ride right up on top of the leg. So when I sit and I spend a lot of time in the car, it digs in. Whereas this gun, the longer barrel gun, when you sit, it tends to push into the center. The only other thing I'll talk about is a lot of guys worry about safety with this. I'll just tuck in for a second. Guys worry about safety with appendix carry. We know that you're very likely to lower your center of gravity. One of the big ironies of this whole I don't like appendix carry thing from a lot of the maybe older school guys in the community is these are the same guys that are teaching people to stand up perfectly straight, and they deride some of the stuff we teach in CFS, which is this lowered center of gravity, really aggressive, managed recoil, and work well with what your body does naturally. Naturally, when you go into a fight, you lower your center of gravity. Well, all of a sudden, now that they want to come up with reasons why appendix carry's bad, they're acknowledging, well, you're probably going to be in a lowered center of gravity when you're in a fight, and when you draw your gun, you're going to point it right in at yourself. Well, that's dumb. Don't do that, right? So what we teach people to do is, you get startled and you go into your lowered center of gravity, push your hips forward when you get your grip, come up, orient, and then drive out and shoot, and come back in. Because if you do leave your center of gravity lowered, if you keep that waist closed, you are going to either cover yourself, or you're going to have the gun get jammed up on your rib cage, your belly, or whatever else you got going on here. So the trick is, as you reach for the gun, just push those hips forward, drive back out, and after you come in, you do your assessment, whatever you have to do. That's when you push those hips back forward again and get that gun back in. So the gun is actually less likely, if you're doing this right, to cover yourself. Because all of us have been on the range and seen this guy, right? So when you're coming back to that 4 o'clock position and you're covering yourself, and from the 3 o'clock position, you're doing this, but what, this was okay? No, this wasn't okay. This was never okay. It's much more likely to happen as you come back across your body than it is if you're staying in front of your body the whole time, right? And as far as what it's pointed at while it's in the holster, it's in the holster, right? You sit in a room, go stand up in front of a room full of SWAT guys or SEALs or Green Berets, you've got 50 guns pointed at you because they're all wearing drop legs and they're all sitting in chairs. When guns are in holsters, I'm not worried about where it's pointed. That's the whole point of the holster, right? So I'm not worried about what happens while I'm moving around. I'm worried about what happens right now. And if I have a good draw stroke and I'm pushing my hips forward and my trigger finger is where it's supposed to be, I'm not really in any extra danger here, and I'm probably in less danger than I would be if I'm crossing my body. Because if you watch guys on the range moving dynamically, you're probably going to see a lot of this. Where even if they're not driving the gun in on themselves, they are covering their legs, because again, they widen their stance and lower their center of gravity. So from the 4 o'clock position, somebody moves laterally and draws the gun, they're coming out and crossing their leg. I'm not saying it's okay, but I'm saying we do it all the time. It's one of the reasons we stress trigger finger position. It's one of the reasons we don't take the safety off on a 1911 until we're driving the gun out. So in the ready position, we're still here.